discussing a case of toxicological emergency that was presented to our ER. So, coming to the case, a 55-year-old male was brought to our ER with an alleged history of consumption of organophosphorus pesticide about 48 hours back, and he was referred from outside hospital in a intubated state. So, coming to the initial 10-second assessment, the patient was on like intubated state, sedated and paralyzed from outside hospital and brought to ER with ambu ventilation, and like initial 10-second assessment, there was no significant interventions to be done, so we went with the primary survey. So primary survey, patient had a like airway secured with ET tube of size 7.5 with angle of mouth secured at 21. There was no secretions in the ET tube, no obvious obstruction with adequate fogging, and the ET tube had a cuff pressure of 32 millimeters of mercury, and there was no obvious C-spine abnormalities also noted. So we like connected the patient to a mechanical ventilator, and coming to the breathing part, the air entry was bilaterally equal. There was no added sounds. Patient was connected to ventilator in on a PCV mode with like pressure of 16, PEEP of 6 and FiO2 of 30%. That was a setting with which he was transported, and he was maintaining a saturation of 100% in this setting. Patient coming to the circulation, patient had a BP of 100 by 60 millimeters of mercury with a pulse rate of 118 per minute, and there was good peripheral pulses felt, and the rhythm was also regular. Coming to the disability part, patient GCS at that moment could not be assessed because he was sedated and paralyzed from outside, but we are not sure of like the drug, the dose and the last time of the sedation given. And a patient had pupils 3 millimeter bilateral very sluggishly reacting to light, and his DRBS checked was 140 milligram per deciliter. Coming to the exposure part, patient temperature was checked for, and it was 99.8 degree Fahrenheit, and the already he had underwent decontamination everything from the outside hospital, and it is a delayed presentation. So at that moment we had taken like personal protective equipments, everything was taken by the care of by the staff in dealing with the patient, but the patient was not given a wash or anything because it was a delayed presentation and already decontamination was done from outside. So after the primary survey, we have a case of organophosphorus poisoning patient referred from outside hospital with in a sedated and paralyzed state with no active interventions at that point to be done in the primary survey.
Okay. Once you receive patients like this, no, from another hospital and things like that, try to add few more things like was the patient, having any arterial line, things like that, and any other infusions if the patient is on. So that will kind of complete the picture. Okay.
See, ideally, so this is one request for all the doctors who are referring. So whenever you are referring someone, you should have a detailed note, especially this is a pretty critically ill patient. So we should have everything documented. So when he was intubated, the reason for intubation, so a proper discharge summary and followed by a proper transfer note. So when you are referring, maybe n number of reasons, maybe the family wanted to go to some other center, whatever be the reason, you should have a detailed description has to be given to the bystanders, and that should be handed over to us. Like this, in this scenario, we are not sure when he was paralyzed. So when was the last sedation received? So all these documents are not there. So the most important part of an EMS transportation is the documentation of all those things, and it should be handed over. And when you receive this patient, then you will have a better idea. So what to be done next and all. Here we are not very sure what happened to him, whether what was his baseline GCS, whether it is due to the sedation, we have no idea. Again, you have received this patient, the priority in this patient, for like any other patient, will be airway, breathing, circulation. So more importantly, you have to see whether how is the patency of the airway. Like he is already intubated, so you have confirmed that the tube is in position by your auscultatory method and by your EtCO2 monitoring. That has to be done, and you have to make a note of the cuff pressure that you have done, that cuff pressure you have mentioned, and you wanted to change the ET tube size here. That is my question, because 7.5 for an adult male, is it acceptable?
Sir, ideally like 8 size tube, 8 and 8.5 is usually for adult male, and 7.5 will be mostly for females will prefer.
So at present you have to make a note of that he is having a smaller size ET tube, so that you can make a note, no need to immediately change this. That is not warranted at this point, but you can make a note that he is on this thing. And angle of mouth, very important. Angle of mouth you have to document, because transportation time, the tube can get dislodged. Again, you need to transfer from your ER to some other area. So you make sure that your ET is holding on in position, and you have to look in for the air entry. Then you have to went ahead with the circulation. Regarding cervical spine that you had mentioned, cervical spine, why you wanted to say it in a poisoning victim?
Sir, one thing is we don't know whether the patient had any seizures or any fall or anything following this, and we don't know like whether it was any trauma related. If it is, we think it is a deliberate self-harm. We don't know if it is like someone forcefully given him, and any trauma related with that and all, we don't know. And it is like medical legal case.
Okay, so the most important part here is the cervical spine injury in a toxicology victim or any victim that the history is not clear. Treat just like a trauma victim. So we will not miss a cervical spine injury, especially in this patient. He's sedated, paralyzed. We will not know. Maybe obvious we are seeing a step deformity or something. We will come to know, okay, he has got a potential cervical spine injury, so we can have an additional protection. So that is regarding your airway, breathing, circulation. Heart rate, what was the heart rate?
It was 118 beats per minute.
108. What was the blood pressure?
It was 100 by 60 millimeters.
100 by 60 millimeter. You want to do any intervention at this point of time?
Sir, this patient, we can assess for his fluid status and can give a fluid.
If needed, you can give fluids. The most important things are lines and all those things. Whether already he might be placed in a center line.
Yeah, he was already having, he was not having a center line, but he was having 2 large bore IV cannulas, one EJV,
external jugular vein,
and other in the cubital vein.
So at present we are happy with the IV lines. Any arterial lines? No.
There was no arterial lines. He had a Foley's catheter in situ and a Riles tube in situ, which was checked, position was checked for by the auscultatory method and was confirmed.
Because again, Foley's catheter we have to document, because lot of time what can happen, we had incidences where the patient has been catheterized outside and then urethral injury has been missed and has been referred here, and finally when we are seeing this patient, he has got a urethral injury. So you have to clearly document all those things, especially this sort of critically ill patients coming in. Okay, so now coming to the most important thing you said regarding decontamination. So the patient has presented after 48 hours. You said we didn't go ahead with any GI decontamination or any other decontamination. So what was the reason? Because already he has received. So you want to do anything else right now?
Sir, this patient, we can give a wash because delayed absorption, dermal absorption, everything can happen. So we can give a wash, and eye wash, everything can be given. While we are dealing with the patient, the staff should be careful, because they all also can get exposed to. So basically this latex gloves, everything should be avoided, and we have to go for nitrile like gloves and all while dealing with the patient.
So the most important thing, we have to take care of ourselves, personal protective equipments. Previously when we are telling about PPE, no one was aware of. Now everybody is aware of what exactly what a PPE means, a level 1, level 2 PPE means. And maybe removal of dress and washing, maybe again may not be a bad thing to do. You can still do a whole body wash and remove his clothes, because maybe he has gone to the hospital, they have not done a proper decontamination. It's always better to do, and you have to ideally, when the patient is coming first to us, we need to preserve these things.
Clothes.
Preserve the clothes. But here we can again, you can call for a medical legal expert opinion, and if they warrant, definitely you need to take back the clothes and keep it with you. GI decontamination, any role for GI decontamination, gastric lavage?
Sir, if the patient's sensorium is bad, only after securing the airway we can.
No, this patient I am asking.
Right now, like after 48 hours, there is not much of a use, sir, because if it was in the initial period, we can give a GI decontamination, activated charcoal and all these things, but may not be of much of a use, because the specific antidote we have to give is atropine. That is of use, but we can give a gastric lavage and
so quickly regarding decontamination means GI decontamination and whole body decontamination, whole bowel irrigation if needed, ocular decontamination, everything. So within 1 hour of presentation, definitely yes, even role for activated charcoal is there, but later on after, like for this patient at present we are not preferring anything. So you have done your primary assessment. You have did some adjuncts to your primary assessment. Now you have reassessed the patient and you are going for your secondary
sample
evaluation.
history and
Secondary evaluation. Go ahead.
So,
Anything else? Please?
Okay.
sample history, the patient has no known comorbidities, no allergic history. He is alcoholic, regularly consumes alcohol, and the last alcohol intake was supposed to be the day of consumption of the OP poisoning. That was like around 2 days back. And coming to the events leading to the current situation, the patient was seen lying on the kitchen floor of his house about 2 days back with some frothy secretions from his mouth by his daughter, and he was very restless and was taken to a local hospital, from where they referred him to a higher center. And during the travel to the higher center, the patient became drowsy and unresponsive, and he was taken to that hospital in a cardiac arrest state, was given CPR and resuscitated, and he was intubated from there, and he was in that hospital for about 48 hours. And in that outside referral letter, it is documented that he had underwent a gastric aspiration by a Ryle's tube was inserted, gastric aspiration was done, and activated charcoal was also given. 50-gram activated charcoal was also given initially, and he was started on atropine injection, but they haven't documented the cumulative dose of atropine given for complete atropinization, but he was referred as being transferred with a 8 mg per hour infusion of atropine. But while coming to our ER, it was 4 mg per hour infusion was atropine was on flow, and he has also received a pralidoxin for about 48 hours infusion was given to him. And he was also put on IV antibiotics from outside hospital. He was on piperacillin tazobactam from the outside hospital, and other symptomatic management was done. This was the referral letter and the history from the other hospital. There is no history of any other co-ingestion, he had taken alcohol, but no history as if he had taken any other co-ingestion. And the toxicology sample of the gastric aspirate in blood and urine was sent to our institute for toxicological analysis. So that reports were pending. Other investigations in the outside hospital didn't mention any significant abnormality.
Okay.
Yeah. So how is alcohol going to influence the presentation in this patient?
Sir, alcohol the absorption can be more with the alcohol. It can increase the gastric absorption, and the presentation will be altered.
Yeah, presentation can be altered.
Because pinpoint pupil, everything will be there in this OP poisoning. Alcohol can cause more of a sympathetic overdrive features and all. Then
And overlap with neurological symptoms also.
Yes. Then other thing is
What will happen to the heart rate?
this will cause a bradycardia. The OP poisoning mostly will cause a bradycardia, but nicotinic overactivity can also cause a tachycardia, but mostly we see bradycardia, and alcohol can cause a tachycardia. So this heart rate can be masked.
So heart rate can be sometimes normal. There cannot be a tachycardia. There can be, the classical description is here, bradycardia, pinpoint pupil and excessive secretions. You can have muscarinic and nicotinic effect. Depending upon that, you can remember the mnemonics. What is the mnemonic?
For a muscarinic effect, it is sludge BBB, that is salivation, lacrimation, urination, defecation, then gastric emesis, then the 3 B's are bronchoria, bronchospasm and bradycardia. And the nicotinic effect can be the muscle fasciculations, the muscle paralysis, tachycardia, hypertension and all those symptoms.
Okay. So the classically we are description is the toxidrome. So especially this patient was very pretty straightforward. They has been referred from another hospital. So we think they have diagnosed it as an OP and referred here. So usually the situation is an unknown ingestion. So unknown ingestion, definitely we need to go ahead with the toxidromes. So toxidromes that should be fitting for an organophosphorus should be what all we have described will be classically a bradycardia, but can have tachycardia, maybe a normal heart rate because of the various reasons whatever we have described, and excessive secretions. So this will be the classical history that you will get. So after the arrival to the ER, now how will you proceed with this patient? Because already he is on an infusion, he is sedated, paralyzed, and he has started on an IV antibiotics. So we will discuss this patient, and after this we will discuss when a patient directly come to us what needed to be done.
In this patient, like later after some time when he was out of his sedation and paralysis, he was started to be like very restless and agitated, and his heart rate was also on the higher side, more than 100, 118 like that. Even when he was paralyzed, his heart rate was on the higher side, and his pupils were dilated, like not a pinpoint pupil, and there was no secretions, chest auscultation, there was no crepitations, and he was also dry, there was no other secretions. He was having a like adequate atropenization was there, and since he was having a fever and this higher rate of heart rate, we can try to stop the atropine infusion. Since he was restless, maybe because of over atropenization, he might be having these features, so we can stop it, monitor the patient if at all.
What's it called?
Over atropenization, atropine toxicity,
Atropine
psychosis. So we can monitor the patient. If the patient is developing any crepitation, secretions or anything, we can start the patient again with a lower dose of the infusion, maybe like 70 to 80% of what the infusion rate was, or we can go for a glycopyrrolate, an alternative to atropine, which has a lesser CNS effect.
Now the question is that this patient you have started on atropine, you said everything right, but what will be the first reason for a patient who is restless? He is on ventilator, so he'll have some tube discomfort, so you need to plan of an adequate sedation for him. So that will be the first thing. You see, even if a non-poisoning victim that is coming to us who is on a ventilator, once the sedation and paralysis is out, they will start becoming restless. So the first thing is that you have to secure make sure that your A, B, C is fine, that you have done, and make sure that you have connected to the ventilator properly, get a blood gas and see what is the status, whether there is any PCO2 retention, whether there is what is the hypoxia status. Already he is on a 30% FiO2. His PEEP requirement is very less now only. So now next thing you will ask for an blood gas analysis, titrate your ventilator, maybe start off thinking of a sedation, maybe intermittent paralysis, maybe a sedation would be more than enough, and very rarely only you need an intermittent paralysis for routine patients. Then you think of a definitive management. Already he is on a 4 mg per hour infusion. So now my question is, what is the sign of atropinization?
What we have to check for is the chest auscultation. There should not be any crepitations or any secretions.
So adequate atropine sign is that the chest is clear. In this patient it is pretty easy. You auscultate, look for crepitation. It doesn't reflect upon your heart rate and your pupillary size. That is one thing. Even if the pupillary size is fully dilated and the patient is already having increased heart rate, that doesn't mean that the patient is atropinized. So the sign for an organophosphorus patient to be atropinized is they should have drying of secretions. And this patient is already having a Foley's catheter. That is very important again. Foley's catheterization has to be done before starting atropine. That is again mandatory. So that is the sign that you need to consider. So you can, yes, as you said, the chest secretions are clear. You can think of stopping or maybe decreasing the dose of atropine. Maybe the psychosis is not related to atropine, we exactly don't know. Maybe we need some time, maybe the next 6 to 8 hours we will get a better idea. Or else you can have glycopyrrolate as an option, as it won't cause the
CNS
blood-brain barrier. So it won't have the CNS effects of atropine. So when you, or maybe you can mix and match, maybe a smaller dose of atropine and a smaller dose of glycopyrrolate also. So these are the options that you need to always keep in your mind. Never abrupt stoppage of atropine might bring back the symptoms again, but you can slowly decrease, maybe or hourly you can give 1 or second hourly you can give small dose of atropine or glycopyrrolate and watch the patient and decrease. So
dose of glycopyrrolate?
Sir, glycopyrrolate we can give 0.2 mg IV doses can be given. Maybe at a fixed interval of 4th hourly to 6th hourly we can give like that. Along with that we can give a glycopyrrolate nebulization also to dry up the secretions. Both ways we can give.
Okay, it's all same as atropine. Remember like that. Okay, any problems with glycopyrrolate? What's the compared to atropine? What is the disadvantage of glycopyrrolate?
Glycopyrrolate, basically in the OP poisoning, we have both the CNS effects and also the peripheral effects are there. So if you are giving only glycopyrrolate, the CNS effects won't be reversed because it is not crossing the blood-brain barrier. So when we are giving glycopyrrolate, initially we have to give it along with atropine because atropine will only reverse the CNS effects.
Moreover, the cost is also going to be a problem. Okay, most of the patients who are going to take organophosphorus are going to have financial issues also, right? So cost wise, it's going to make a difference. Right? Atropine is a cheaper drug and glycopyrrolate is going to be costlier one.
So the key message is that atropine is the drug of choice. There is no option for glycopyrrolate. Don't think that glycopyrrolate is the option. Atropine is the best drug that is available. But when you can have issues like atropine psychosis, but still you wanted to continue your atropine, then you can think of switching over to glycopyrrolate and decreasing the dose of atropine. So again, the cost factor, I think it will be 10 times more costlier than glycopyrrolate and again than atropine. And how atropine comes? It comes as an
Usually we have vials, ampoules, and also for this type of patients we'll get 100 mg bottles are there.
So that is again important thing. When we think of an ampule, it is 0.6 mg. 1 ml is 0.6 mg. When you wanted to give in organophosphorus, you have to take that 100 ml bottle and that will contain 1 ml 1 mg bottle. So depending upon it will be easy for us to titration everything. So that is one thing. So you need not break more ampules. You can ask for the bottle of atropine that should be made available in your hospital. And again, so that is regarding the role of atropine. Now let's see, this patient has come directly to you. Okay. Now this is the situation, you have done your decontamination, you have managed your airway, breathing, circulation, decontamination, and you have intubated him also. And how will you decide on the dose of atropine?
We can start with like a small dose, like 1 to 2 mg IV of atropine. We can give it double the dose and give it like every 5 to 15 minutes, and we can repeat it till the patient is having drying up of secretion. And once we have reached the complete atropinization, then we can put the patient on a continuous infusion, maybe at a rate of 10 to 20% of the complete required atropine dose.
So for example, you gave like 2 mg atropine every 10 minutes, and after like giving, for example, 10 mg of atropine, the patient's secretions have dried up. So how much mg of atropine you will select as an hourly infusion?
1 mg per hour, like 10%.
Usually
to 2 mg.
1/3. That is the easiest thing. Will be 1/3 of the total dose. So maybe around 2 to 3 mg. 2 to 3 mg you can take, and it can continue as an infusion. And again, depending upon your desired effects, you decrease your atropine. So it's all clinically. Usually you will take like 48 to 72 hours for your atropine to be continued. Then only you will be able to stop your atropine unless and until the patient have secretions decreased.
And already Krishna told that the patient was intubated. During intubation, what are the key things to keep in mind?
One thing is, ideally we shouldn't go for succinylcholine as a paralytic agent here, because it will the acetylcholinesterase enzyme will be like blocked, so it will cause a delayed paralysis. So we can go for non-depolarizing agents like rocuronium, but here the dose of rocuronium should be like more than the routine dose. That is one thing.
Okay, that is an important point what you mentioned now.
Now, other than atropine, what's the other drug?
Atropine, glycopyrrolate, and
then the next thing is like oxams. Pralidoxim is can be used. That is the OP reactivating agents. The basic thing is it can be given like initially in the first 48 hours we can give pralidoxim. So the dose is like we can give a bolus of 30 mg per kg followed by an infusion of like 8 mg per kg per hour for about 24 to 48 hours. So how it helps is like it will bind with the OP acetylcholinesterase complex, and it will leave from the complex, leaving behind the acetylcholinesterase intact. So like it will help in the reactivation also, and it will also some studies show it will delay the aging of the complex. So it has dual effect.
what is aging?
Aging means after sometimes the organophosphorus acetylcholinesterase complex, from this complex a phenyl group will be leaving, and so that resistant complex is made because its activity cannot be reactivated. That is known as aging. So aging also like it will be varying for different compounds. We have both the diethyl, dimethyl compounds and all. So according to the compound, the aging will be different. So the symptoms also will be like varying. If the aging is delayed, we have more time to give the PAM or everything and improve the patient. If it is like aging is in a very short span of time, the symptoms to reverse the symptoms, it will be difficult.
Okay. Now, the most important thing is that the oximes, the dose, you can remember 4 ampules. An adult, 4 vials or 4 ampules as stat, and followed by 1 ampule or 1 vial per hour. So, 1 ampule is 500 mg. So, approximately you calculate 50 kg, it will you have to give 2 grams. Then you have to give 500 mg per hour as an infusion. So, you have to continue for 24 to 48 hours.
Will you give PAM alone or?
No, anyway, it is like atropine plus PAM. Atropine should be given in all cases.
Okay, so that is regarding your paradoxine and oxide. Now the question arises is that suppose you have been in doubt whether it is organophosphorus, whether it is carbamate. That is a common question. Can we start paradoxine?
Sir,
You don't have a toxicology facility. You are not very sure what he has consumed, but the toxidromes look same for carbamate as well as organophosphorus.
there is no issue in giving PAM here, sir, because we don't know if it is OP, organophosphorus or carbamate.
There is
we
no
can give
contraindication. Definitely, there is no contraindication.
we can give atropine and PAM in this case. Even if it is a co-ingestion, we are knowing that both are consumed. Also, we can give PAM.
PAM. Okay, so that is again one important thing, and one most important thing that all insecticide and pesticide is not organophosphorus. That is what we are commonly doing in peripheral setups, that we think that it is organophosphorus, we treat like organophosphorus, but there are n number of agents, pesticides and insecticides, that are not organophosphorus, that are not carbamates, and like for example, simple example is paraquat. Paraquat doesn't help, atropine and this thing doesn't help in this scenario. So always look into your toxidromes. So toxidrome wise, if it is fitting into an OP compound, you can start this treatment. So don't treat, the common mistake that everyone does is treat every insecticide and pesticide poisoning just like OP poisoning. That should not be done. Now for this patient, he had some hospital acute issues, like he has started on an antibiotic. You think piperacillin tazobactam is an ideal choice for this patient? If so, justify.
A broad spectrum antibiotic like piperacillin tazobactam can be given, but if we are suspecting an aspiration, we can add on something like a clindamycin or if it is a documented thing, a path is developed, we can give a clindamycin. Otherwise, we can go for like augmentin.
Suppose this patient has come primarily to you, what will be your preferred antibiotic of choice?
So we can start him on like augmentin or ceftriaxone.
Okay, so piperacillin tazobactam, there should be a definitive indication. Maybe after 48 hours you have started on augmentin, but fever again it's very difficult. You are giving atropine. So we have any other markers like procalcitonin or anything is increasing, or there is a new patch that is developing in your X-ray. All those things you have to consider. But maybe initially to start with, maybe a penicillin will be more than enough, and later on converting into a higher antibiotic as and when it is required.
How will you manage a seizure in case of OP poisoning?
Sir, we can give put him on benzodiazepine. So according to the studies, like it is diazepam is mostly suggested for seizures in OP poisoning. 10 mg IV stat doses are given, and even some studies are prophylactically giving diazepam to prevent the seizure episodes also.
Okay. And phenytoin usually is not considered a drug of choice. And along with diazepam, as you know, it's also used for as an antidote, crypto antidote in military compacts. If the patient nerve agent is used, it's a diazepam auto injectors. Okay, what are the delayed complications?
Sir, basically after the initial presentation, there is can be the intermediate syndrome can happen. That is like from 72 hours to 96 hours. It is mostly presenting as muscle weaknesses. That can be the neck muscle weakness, respiratory muscle weaknesses, diaphragmatic weakness, proximal muscle weakness, or muscles innervated by cranial nerves. All can be affected. So this is the time when the weaning from ventilator, everything will be like coming difficult. So after that, then comes the delayed OP induced chronic neuropathy. So it is basically presented as a foot drop, or any paresthesia can happen. Maybe after a week or two, patient may be complaining of a glove and stoking representation. Then some females may have multiple issues like pain syndromes and all those things can happen. Then sometimes patient may be having some depression, delirium, and all those psychiatric issues also.
The key point is that you have to treat the initial cholinergic phase properly. If it is not treated well, they will go for the intermediate syndrome, then intermediate syndrome related complication and delayed polyneuropathy. So maybe the patient might come in delayed polyneuropathy or maybe intermediate syndrome. So you have to always keep a note of the initial phase of giving pralidoxime and atropine. Adequate dose of atropine and pralidoxime holds the key that so that the patient won't progress into an intermediate syndrome or delayed polyneuropathy. So what happened to this patient?
This patient, like, we could wean him off the ventilator in 3 days after coming here. He was extubated, and the patient was completely better after that. He was mobilized. He haven't developed any features of any muscle weakness or any polyneuropathy or anything.
Also, he had a cardiac arrest and he had a preferably a good outcome here.
Outcome.
So there was no other hypoxic
injury or anything. And he was discharged in 5 days of admission. He was discharged.
Okay. So what was the advice on discharge that you have given to him, or what else treatment options you need to think of him?
This patient is an alcoholic and had history of now deliberate self-harm. So he requires a psychiatric evaluation. So there is more chance of him repeating the incident and all. So we have to give a adequate a psychiatric consultation, and if required, admission and management under psychiatry should be given. And also this patient can have delayed neuropathy features. So he has to be adequately mobilized. He should do all the limb mobilizing exercises, everything. And if at all he is having any symptom, we can check for that.
Moreover, he can have alcohol withdrawal also, no?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So to treat that also. Medical legal implications here?
It is since the patient had completely recovered and discharged, there is not much of issue. But if the patient had died, then it becomes a medical
Definitely,
legal.
you need to intimate to the police, and further action depending upon their investigation, they will decide to go ahead with an autopsy or not. That is up to the judgment of the police. So medical legal formality, definitely initially the patient comes, all the preservation of the clothes, everything, and proper documentation. Maybe he has come pretty sick because he needs intubation. Maybe early itself we can intimate them, such and such patient has come. It is up to them to make it as a medical legal case or not. But it is always better in this scenario to intimate them early rather than a late intimation. And if they wanted to take an consent or whatever statement from the patient, they can come and do that. But he was intubated here, but at that point was not feasible. So to conclude, in a crux, it will be like the early management. The decontamination is the primary, securing the airway, breathing, circulation, and a proper GI decontamination like a gastric lavage should be done after securing the airway, because airway is already under compromise. So you have to make sure that your airway is secured. Then you go ahead with the your gastric lavage, roll off your activated charcoal. Yes. Then coming to the major antidote, that is your atropine is a drug of choice. Maybe if it has got CNS effect, you can think of switching over to glycopyrrolate. Definitely pralidoxime there is a role. Even if it is a carbamate poisoning, don't worry, you start it and later on your toxic screen come, let us see. Any role for RBC cholinesterase or serum cholinesterase?
Sir, yes, in diagnosing, we can send for we have the test serum cholinesterase level is available in our institution. RBC cholinesterase is a more specific test, but serum cholinesterase is more easily available. So depending it is not like the severity or prognostication we can say, but we can diagnose that if the level is on the lower side.
It is more useful when you don't have an history of an ingestion and somebody is coming with an OP toxidrome, so we can get a correlation. We can set, so that way it will be helpful, because they are denying that there is no ingestion, but clinically you looks like an OPC. So in that scenario it will be very helpful. And also always remember regarding your co-ingestion and roll for your toxicological analysis, your gastric aspirate, your blood and urine samples to be sent for your toxicological examination.
So in this patient, his gastric content and blood had come positive for quinalphos, which is an organophosphorus compound. And his serum cholinesterase level was around 1300, which is our reference range is 5600 to 11000. So it is on the lower side, but some conditions can cause a low value. So that should also be kept in mind while interpreting the value.
So that can conclude. Okay.
Okay, good.
Thank you.